Welcome to Hiraeth, the home of modern Welsh politics. Hello, welcome to a live recording of the Hiraeth podcast recorded here at the wonderful Chapter Arts Centre in Cardiff. We have just finished a screening of the film Is Soon, a film about the Battle of Wales, seeing Welsh language campaigners personified by Gwynfor Evans and the Westminster government led by Margaret Thatcher to establish a Welsh language television channel. Without wanting to give away the ending too much. Sorry for the uninitiated, we are now marking the 40th anniversary of S4C. And we are joined by a great panel of guests to discuss the story of Is Soon, as well as S4C's role in Wales as it reaches middle age, and the ongoing calls for more powers over broadcasting. So we are joined by Dewi Rhys Williams, who plays G.O. Williams in the film Is Soon. We have also Roger Williams, many Williamses in Wales, of course, the screenwriter of the film. Hello, Roger. As well as Bethan Senedd, the former Plaid Cymru member of the Welsh Parliament and chair of the Senedd. Bethan. So we're going to start with a few questions about the film. Roger, can you tell us a little bit about what drew you to the project?
I've wanted to write something which is historical period for a long time, and I haven't been able to. It's something which I find quite interesting about Welsh TV and film is that we don't really, unlike other cultures, we don't really go back and look at our history and dramatise it. So it was on my list of things to do, and being aware that S4C was going to be celebrating a big milestone this year. It's about 2 years ago that I kind of thought, is there a story there? Because like most people, I knew about Gwynfor Evans. I was aware of the campaigning done by Plaid Cymru and Cymdeithas around having a Welsh language channel. But I didn't really have I didn't know what the story dramatically would be. So I went to S4C and I said, I've got this idea and I think I'd like to write something, but I don't really know what. And so they said, right, go away, spend a couple of months doing some research and come back to us. So off I went and I did my research and I read a hell of a lot of stuff. And I met a number of people who were part of the history, people who were there, which was a brilliant honour. And the more I found out about it, the more I fell in love with the story and thought, I want to write something about this. And then I just got really excited about what the film could say about our past, could say about our future. And that's an important element of it. It's to get people talking about where we go next in terms of broadcasting, in terms of culture, in terms of the language. And then we got obsessed with this idea that, it needs to be seen in cinemas because that's something else that we don't really do in Welsh media. We seem to have stopped. This is a huge generalization, but we've sort of stopped making films, and we certainly haven't made that many films in the Welsh language since the glory days of films like Solomon and Gaynor and Hiraeth Wyn, famously. Hiraeth Wyn, amen.
My A-level now coming back to me.
Yeah. So that's a bit of a rambling explanation of where it came from, really. But it was an ambition to tell a piece of our history.
Dewi, what appealed to you as an actor to the project?
It's the contract, really, and it's just a payment at the end of nothing. No, of course, no. Well, I've known Roger for many years. We've collaborated on a few other things in the past, and I thought it was a very intriguing project. How do you actually put this on screen, the whole idea of how the channel came to fruition in the first place? How do you make it a really interesting project for people to enjoy on screen? Because let's face it, it's quite a dry piece of thing in its visual form. But this is the first time I see the film tonight, and I thought it's a fabulously well done production. Would you like to do the clap? Well done, Roger. Henry, good. But it's hard to imagine that, as you say, it's 40 years later, and the dearth of productions and all sorts of fields in done in that time is quite magnificent. We have to cherish it and keep going with it and not let it, disappear through other ways, if not being too political, shall I say.
I'm interested in what the panel has to think about what the film says about sort of prevailing attitudes to the Welsh language, to Wales's relationship with the rest of Britain during this period. Would any of you feel like you want to say anything on that, Roger? Maybe?
Well, I think that was one of the things that I found fascinating about the story. I was 1979. I was 5, and you look into the story and you realise that the referendum on devolution had been fought and lost in 79. And you have to look at Wales and the UK through a slightly different lens. And that was interesting in terms of lead character Kerry and the way that she's coming into the story, full of enthusiasm and optimism about what the future held, because that for a lot of people, a hell of a lot of people who voted for Thatcher's first government, that was the overriding emotion. But then to look at the disappointment that was felt by the nationalists in Wales at that time, and then the fact then to be told that after over a decade of campaigning and promises made by all political parties to set up a Welsh language channel at that election, they were faced with an announcement that was made at a speech in Cambridge, I believe, by Whitelaw. We're not doing that now. We're going to stick with the status quo, but you'll get a few more hours. It was crushing. It was devastating. And we look at where we are now. We have devolution, and yet we are still in a situation where decisions about S4C are made at Westminster. And it's been curious with this film because it is playing outside of Wales as well. One of the fascinating reactions from audiences outside of Wales is, we don't know about this story. Why don't we know about this story? And that gets me into a conversation about, well, there's a lot of stories about Wales that you don't know.
There's a lot of stories we don't know about Wales in Wales.
But why is that? And in terms of cultural attitudes, I think it's fascinating, and it feeds back into the discussion about where decisions about broadcasting are made. Where are the editorial decisions about broadcasting in the UK made? And it's opened up this, I know the debate was going on anyway, but it's brought the debate to the public in a sense, so that it isn't a debate which is happening in the Senedd or in the corridors of the BBC or S4C. It feels like people are starting to engage with, well, what kind of broadcasting do we want, and why aren't our stories better known? And how do we try and fix that?
Bethan, this film depicts an incredible political battle, but how would you reflect on that and sort of can you draw any comparisons with the political battles on this issue you've had, perhaps whether that be in Wales or in the UK in general?
Yeah, well, firstly, I would just like to say congratulations to Roger and the team. I thought it was a really good film, and I liked the humour as well, because like you said, some of these things in corridors can be quite boring, but also, really...
Speaking from personal experience there, I can tell.
They can be quite boring committees. But no, you made it alive and you made it relevant and you made it fun, so I'd like to commend you for that, and I know Roger for many years, and, one of the committee inquiries that we did was saying there are no films being made in Wales. We need funding for films. And so I, for one, am very pleased with that. But yes, with regards to the scenes where we saw the sheep and the mountains and lots of different valleys, well, we had Rodri Talvan Davis, who was the current... has he moved position now? He's been elevated up the chain of command. Anyway, at the time he was BBC Director of Wales, and we were talking about opt-outs for radio. So you probably listened to BBC Radio 1. They used to do opt-outs for Welsh music from Wales that was on BBC Radio 1, but then we would hear it in we would hear from Wales all the Welsh new music. In Scotland, you'd hear all the Scottish new music. And in Northern Ireland, you'd hear all the Northern Irish new music. We were saying we needed more of those type of opt-outs so that we could have more content from Wales on radio. And Roger Talvin-Day was saying, oh no, but the geography was so difficult in Wales. We can't possibly do that. And I saw this on the film and I was like, I have to speak about that after, because we're now in 2020, whatever it is, and we're still having that debate. In fact, we should be having more than one S4C now. You know, we shouldn't just have the one channel, you know. So yes, it's been amazing to watch this development, but boy, are we slow, you know? Come on. We need to have much more than what we've got even now. So the campaign is there. Get on the streets, people.
Just picking up on what Bethan said, it's interesting because at a screening in Carmarthen earlier this week, the point was made that the battle is incomplete. That original movement was actually to establish a Welsh language television channel, was also to establish an English language television channel for Wales, and was also about establishing an independent broadcasting authority for Wales. So one of the people who was at the forefront of the campaigning for Cymdeithas took the microphone and made that point. We can feel, because you watch this film and you get people get a certain sense of pride in terms of the journey that the language has been on and broadcasting has been on, and the successes that have been. But he wanted to make the point, actually, it's only a battle which has been half won, and there still needs to be movement on those other issues if we are going to become a mature indigenous broadcasting culture.
Yeah, that's certainly something that you'll hear the argument made about, which is that the Welsh language, Welsh broadcasting campaign, as it has been in so many aspects of life, was so strong and took an awful lot of focus, particularly during the period that was depicted, you know, fantastically in the film. But what is the experience, and I think, Bethan, maybe this is something you covered in the Senedd when you were chair of the Culture Committee, in terms of those other relationships that Roger mentioned there, the English-speaking Wales channels, that has always been an uphill battle to make that case, because English speakers are served so well by the UK media, is the argument that you will hear. Why haven't we made more progress on that? Because, you know, the reality is that, you know, upwards of 70% of people in Wales speak only English.
Well, again, I think it comes down to influence and campaigning, and I know the authority that we bring over in terms of these debates. I think we talk a lot about devolving many issues, and broadcasting still seems to be the most contentious one. And I think because people like to overcomplicate it, and people, it's about control. You know, at the end of the day, it's the same as our natural resource. You know, the UK government wants to be able to control that, and through the English language there is more dominance, of course, because more of the population speaks English. So it's not within their interest to relinquish that control. So on the committee that I chaired, when we had the conversation around the devolution of broadcasting, everybody from all parties were saying, oh, we're happy to devolve S4C, but not the rest. Can't possibly be the rest. But then my view is, and I think some of the actors gave evidence as well, and some academics as well, you know, we have the academics on giving their evidence all the time, saying, you know, we shouldn't really disassociate the two, because, you know, we are a nation of diversity and culture. If we just put Welsh language into a pigeonhole, then that's going to confine us more. We need to streamline the Welsh language through other channels. Although, looking back on your film, you know, that seems to have been what it started with, but which people are doing more now, which is trying to get Welsh back on, you know, those English language channels, to show that more people speak it, to show that it's a language of our communities.
Being the oldest member of the panel, I do remember as a young man.
I was 1 year old.
And that was my late teen, around 20. And there was a lot of indignant attitudes towards the formation of the Welsh channel from Welsh speakers as well. Many people within the broadcasting industry just didn't see it as a viable option. Many people working at the BBC, I remember, were really scathing of it, you know. So we have come on in leaps and bounds. And many people within the establishment So Jenny Airy, the very important figure, you know, was editor of Baron magazine, I think, at that particular time, or Vanna, I think I should say. But they all came around eventually, I think. But it took a long time.
So it's discussed a bit in the film, but do you have any sympathy with this concept that the language has been ghettoised onto S4C now, rather than being spread onto the English language channels in Wales?
There is so much confidence, I think, has been built over that period that has dissipated, I think, this idea of a problem with the language and the chip about the language. And you must remember that it's been a fantastic provider of employment for many, many people in that field. And you would like, say, to see that pie being directed in other ways right across the board.
But then you see about resistance, I'd like to take up your point. And unfortunately, we still see that now from people in institutions when we are calling for more powers to Wales. When we heard evidence, you know, we still saw people in positions of influence saying, well, we've got enough now. We can do what we want with what we've got. Well, no, actually, we can't. Ofcom is still ruled from the UK. You know, we still don't have enough money for S4C or for BBC Wales English language productions. So, you know, that's what we need, is to push those people constantly to be a bit more radical. You know, I think of radical and I see that with Els Thomas, you know, that's amazing, isn't it? Wow.
Do you think there's any scope for more bilingual programming that shows that sort of modern bilingual Wales rather than sort of carving off each language onto separate channels?
Yeah, and I think that is going to be a huge shift for people, because as we will have seen, there's an awful lot of English in this film. And that is a creative choice that I take responsibility for, because it felt, even though we were determined to use Welsh actors in this film, and only Welsh actors, because as you can imagine, you know, there were certain voices around saying, maybe we could get Juliet Stevenson or somebody to play Margaret Thatcher. But we felt it's just important. It's a film made by Welsh people about our culture, and we should cast it with a Welsh cast. And it followed then that, well, it's a film about language. It's a film about the relationship between English and Welsh. So we need to hear the English language within it. But it is still contentious. At one of the Q&As this week, somebody in the audience really took S4C to task for what they perceive to be an increase in the use of English on the channel, and accused them of turning it into a bilingual channel. And I listened with great interest to that argument, because absolutely the funding which S4C receives, which is a lot less than it used to get before the government in 2010, the austerity government came in and then looked at S4C's funding and vastly reduced it. It does need to be protected, and it does need to be well spent. But I think people, especially younger generations' attitudes to language has changed. And there are large numbers of very confident young people who use both languages, and they have the right to move between those languages. There's a massive increase compared to 1982 in the number of mixed language families. Dad speaks Welsh, mum doesn't. So that needs to be represented on the screen. And I've got some experience of that, because a few years ago, I used to write and produce a drama series called Bang, which was set in Port Talbot. And it was kind of like, well, as somebody who lives quite local to Port Talbot, if you're going to do a Welsh language drama series in Port Talbot and nobody speaks English, that doesn't really ring true. But what was very interesting about that experience was it was successful on S4C, and then it was bought by BBC Wales, and they showed it on BBC One. And that was a bizarre experience, really, because it did feel as though we'd gone back to spring 1982, where the Welsh language was there proudly with subtitles on the BBC. And there is a whole argument around this model of filming shows back to back as well. I've got a friend who says, I never want to work on a back-to-back production. Why on earth would I want to do it twice? And that speaks to confidence as well. Yes, it's market forces, because if you have a show which is made in English, it is going to sell to more territories internationally. But similarly, I think the market is finally changing, and if something is good enough, it will find a home on another broadcaster outside of Wales.
Yeah, I'm going to ask one question before Rich tells me to shut up. But it is amazing, isn't it, that you can have films like Parasite that win the Best Picture Oscar, but we can't ever imagine a situation where you could have Igwisht show on BBC One rather than S4C is hinterland in either language, right? It's just, we've come to a very weird set of circumstances now.
It is. And a lot of the driver for that, unfortunately, has been about funding. A lot of the driver for that has been, we hear about these shows that get made now, not just for Netflix, but on the BBC as well, where you don't make an hour of drama for less than $1 million. Well, you make an hour of drama for S4C and you've got a quarter of that. So people, in terms of audience, their expectations from a product are really, really high, and they expect it to look good, and you want to have all those stunts, and you want to have a large cast of people, and you just have to be really creative at the moment when you work in Welsh. But if you are able to attract funding by doing another version of it, it boosts your production qualities. And initially, that's how the model started, because I think my friend is right. I don't think anybody wants to do the same thing twice. If you're going to do it twice, why don't you do it 3 times, 4 times, and have all those versions out there?
We're going to invite some audience questions shortly, but I do just want to kind of pick up. There's one line in the film which absolutely hit me in the gut, because it kind of represents something that is a stumbling block for Wales. And they're discussing in the film about who gets to decide about the future of Welsh language broadcasting. And the answer is, we can't do that in Wales because there's no mechanism to do that. And, you look at 1982 and you think, well, here we are in 2023, and it's exactly the same. But things have changed in that we have a Welsh government that is now supportive of the devolution of broadcasting and communications, and in its agreement with Plaid Cymru. Who'd have thought that in 1982 that Labour and Plaid Cymru would be working together in government in a way in a parliament in Wales? But do you think that there's, obviously this film tells a story of a very important battle, an important time in the world of broadcasting. How do you feel we are now? We have a Welsh government that is actively pursuing the devolution of broadcasting. Or I suppose I should probably just say wider media powers these days, because broadcasting itself is a term that is perhaps aging. What do you think, as a panel, that the future of broadcasting in Wales is, or perhaps even should look like?
Shall I go first then?
And you're on the clock because we're going to get some audience questions.
No, I'll go first because the end of this film is a deliberate challenge. It is challenging people to ask exactly that. It's asking them to think about a lot of things, but that is absolutely one of those things. And it's really difficult, because I pick up on what Bethan was talking about. Once you start to devolve broadcasting, yes, you quite straightforwardly devolve S4C, but why should it not be the experience for English language Welsh people? But of course, what you're doing then is you're starting to look at the BBC and dismantling the way in which the BBC operates. One of the facts I picked up when I was doing research for this was that when the BBC was first established, there was one of the first campaigns was to get Welsh language radio programmes on the air, because the BBC didn't want to give Welsh language Welsh language radio programmes, because they felt that to do so would undermine the Britishness of a British corporation.
We've not heard that before.
No. Or since. And it's a curious thing, isn't it? Because what I've seen from the devolution that has happened internally, actually, at the BBC, is that when the editorial control is given to Cardiff, they go off and commission shows like The Pact, which gets something like 12 million views on iPlayer. Now, the Pact wouldn't have been commissioned probably if it hadn't been commissioned in Cardiff and then backed up with funding from London. And that's been a big shift. So if BBC in Cardiff are able to commission work, successful work in that way, what is there to be afraid of? And again, it's those decision makers in London who might have to just accept that things are going to change.
I think it's like with what we've created now with devolution. Most people accept that they wanted to stay, and obviously that happened with S4C. We're saying, it could be a trial for a few years. The same with devolution. People have said now, well, actually, we're quite comfortable with having a government in Cardiff Bay as well. And I think that's what we have to do now with any debate over devolving anything, is to normalise it and to say, well, how are those decisions made to make the best programmes? How can we be as creative as possible by making those programmes as close to the people as possible? How can we be truly representative of a community by making those programmes in Wales by the people of Wales? Because we haven't got there, yet in terms of diversity, in the sense of seeing more people from different ethnic minorities, from people from different walks of life, which you've tried to do in this, but that does not exist yet. So let's not be scared of that. And that is why I think, I support not only the devolution of broadcasting, but other things, because ultimately that TV show, that radio broadcast, that social media content is so much more meaningful to the people of Wales than anything that can be created by somebody far away. And that's true of everywhere in the world. If you're in Spain or the Nordic countries, some of the most successful drama comes from the Nordic countries. I love the Nordic dramas, but they know how to do it well because they talk to the people that they represent.
No, there was a lot of unease about the idea of devolving broadcasting in the first few years. But as I said, the political will is there now because Plaid Cymru and the Labour Party together are working in unison, which is a great thing. I mean, it's no secret that the Labour Party is slightly, should I say, hesitant to the idea of Welsh broadcasting back in the early 1980s. Oh, the bum fighting. But no, it was just an interesting. But now things have improved immeasurably, I think. And we can move on with confidence together in this new dawn of Welsh broadcasting.
Future First Minister of Wales.
Where do I vote? Right, I think we probably have time, conscious that we're sort of running a little bit later than planned, for 3 questions. So like a politician, I'm going to hand the really difficult decision to my colleague Matt to pick which 3 questions they are, and then we'll do a mic run in the room.
Do we have any volunteers for questions? Please put your hand up.
Hiya. I'm interested to know what you think the significance of the recent announcement that Dalameth is going to be shown on Netflix. I want to know what you think. How significant is that in terms of spreading Welsh language broadcasting to across the world, and is that is that viable for more productions to be aiming for that, or is it more important that we're concentrating on serving our own audiences here as well?
I think it's great. I think it's essential as the TV industry becomes even more international. We need to be on those platforms. So what I'd like to see now that Dalameth has got a foothold on Netflix in the UK, it would be great for that now to be bought by other territories of Netflix. They should be on in the USA. We released a feature film called Gwledd, The Feast, last year. That film opened in cinemas in the US and is now on Hulu, a major platform in America. We kind of need to be in those spaces. I think the big battle would be, and we would have won that battle, is if Hulu or Netflix actually commissioned a show in Welsh. That would be a game changer, because what's happened with Dalameth, as happened with my film, happened with Bang that I wrote as well, and a number of other shows like Keeping Faith and A Gwyll and so forth, is that they were acquisitioned. So Netflix comes along and they say, yes, we like that. We'd like to buy it for a period of time. So they pay a fee, it gets shown. If Netflix's audience like it, they'll buy the second series, they'll buy the third series. But it would be a game changer if a company like Disney Plus, who are currently in Llanharan preparing to do the second series of Willow, came along and said, yeah, we'll partner on a reimagining of the Mabinogion in Welsh. That is where we need to be really aspirational, really ambitious, because everyone bangs on about how fantastic the creative industries are in Wales and what a vibrant TV industry we have. And we do. But currently, it's kind of seen through the lens of Doctor Who, Sherlock, all these big shows that have been made here. But that success is built on the work that the indigenous broadcasters have been doing for the last 40 years. The makeup artists, the electricians, the art departments, they were all people who came into the industry working for S4C and BBC Wales on their productions. And we now need to be really aspirational about telling our stories, which are written and directed by Welsh people, and that the IP lives here in Wales, and we see Welsh casts in things rather than actors trying to do really bad Welsh accents.
Yeah, quite right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, just in case the BBC Network commissioners are listening, can you advise us whether there's been any active harm caused by non-Welsh speaking audiences in the rest of the UK from hearing Welsh spoken in Dalamesh? Do you think that that's causing some, is this something that maybe could be repeated without, seriously degrading the health of the rest of the UK? Right, don't have to answer. Next question.
Now, I actually have a genuine follow-up to that, if I'm allowed. Okay, thank you. So yeah, like you've said, there's so much made of this indigenous film and TV industry, and how the massive economic benefits it brings to Wales. But do you think the Welsh government are doing enough to sort of invest in those skills and that framework to ensure this indigenous network of creators is supported enough to then get the next big Netflix commission? Bethan? Or no,
I was just going to jump in, because I think my experience there's been a huge improvement in the focus and the resources from Welsh government since the days of the partnership with Pinewood, for example. There has been they've taken control of investment in. Yeah, but they have done, and they are supportive of indigenous Welsh work. I just don't think that currently there is enough being offered, which, if I'm brutally honest, has got widespread appeal. I think we need to get, though speaking as myself and other creators, we need to be cleverer about knowing what the marketplace wants, because we can tell the stories. I'm just not always convinced we're telling the right stories for them to resonate with audiences further afield.
There's a question.
Just as a father of 3 teenagers, just seeing how they access television and the medias, a lot through YouTube, a lot through TikTok and things like that. Is there a worry, or just what's your opinion? How are you going to grab that audience of people who can't speak Welsh and make sure that they are going to be the next generation of your S4C viewers and keep the channel alive?
Well, that was one of the things that my committee looked at, because, funding for... What we find is that people... I'm going to sound really... It's going to sound a bit critical, but, the elderly generation do tend to watch S4C quite well. We can retain their support on many of the programmes. But what we did find was that, especially the mid-teens, they were just dropping off, and they just were not engaged with S4C. So they have developed, Hanch, and they are looking to develop more on YouTube, but they have to do much, much more. But if you want me to be really, really geeky, what I will say is the terms of S4C were that they only had to do linear, which was TV. So they were actually pushing boundaries by even bothering to do some of these other things on YouTube and such. So now the rules have changed so that they can do more online, and they are doing more online, but they have to catch the younger generations as well. I've got a 2-year-old and he doesn't want to watch the Welsh language stuff. He wants to watch dinosaurs fighting each other with this obnoxious man from America. I mean, what SOC needs to do is do that.
More dinosaurs, is that what you're saying?
Welsh. Yeah, well, yeah. Welsh language dinosaurs. Do you want a job? Okay, there we go.
Dinosaurs against Donald Trump.
We'll commission this to SOC next time.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, do you think there'll be a lot more, Welsh films such as this based on history and historical events such as, the Owain Glyndŵr Revolution and beyond?
Hopefully. I mean, one of the interesting things that I've been trying to do for the last few years, and Lee has been trying to do, who's the director of this film, is make the point that we need more Welsh film. That's the first thing. I remember going as a teenager to see a film called Hiraeth, Coming Up Roses, at the Lyric Cinema in Carmarthen, and it was the first time I had ever seen a Welsh language feature film in the cinema. And probably during my life, I've only seen 6 or 7 Welsh language films in the cinema. Lots of people, that this is their first experience of seeing a Welsh language feature. And it is such a fantastic way of showing ambition in storytelling, first of all. Making the point that Welsh belongs on the big screen is important. And it's a great way of taking stories to new audiences. Not just here in Wales, because there is an audience who will come to Chapter, for example, and watch film with subtitles, but they would never think of watching something on SOC, for example. But further afield, the film The Feast, has played all around the world, more or less, and it's every single word of it is in Welsh. So hopefully, but I am still obsessed with this idea of telling our own stories, because a number of my colleagues told me going into this project, what are you doing? You cannot tell period drama on this level of budget. And it's true, it's more expensive. Like, the number of wigs that are in this is huge, and that costs money. And you need people to stick all those wigs down and make sure they stay stuck down. Don't you, Dewi?
Makeup at 6 a.m.
Yeah. So it does cost more. You've got to go in and you've got to change environments, and you've got to take out all the old furniture. You've got to go in and redress places. Just hiring a car for the day, which is period, probably sets you back £2,000. And then you need to pay someone to drive that car because the insurance doesn't cover it. So it's all this stuff, which is why I think we err away from it. But no, let's not err away from it and think it's a problem. Let's again have the confidence to say, yeah, we can tell the story of Owain Glyndŵr. We just need somebody to write it well, and then raise the finance to make it, because at the heart of it, it's a brilliant story.
Yeah, seriously. I'll show that. Great.
So we've got one more question.
First of all, thanks for making such an important and an emotionally evoking film as well. But I was just curious, do you feel as if there's more pressure to deliver high quality films in Welsh because you don't have room to play around as much, or you can't make cheap horror films, or everything that comes through in Welsh has to be of a high quality, because if it isn't, people will just switch off. Like the mid-teens, they'll just everything has to grasp people immediately, otherwise I
think there is so much content out there now, and I'm guilty of it myself. If something isn't grabbing me, or if I think something looks a bit shoddy, I probably won't stick with it. And I think one of the things we do in Wales generally culturally is when something comes along, unfortunately, it happens in a vacuum. So we're watching this today now. I can't tell you when the next Welsh language feature film is going to hit. I don't know when that's going to be. I know there is one which, because S4C have made a commitment, they will make one cinematic release now every year. They've made that commitment. But of course, it's going to take the next one a couple of years before it's ready to be seen in cinemas. So there's more on the way. But because it happens in a vacuum, it gets a lot of attention. And I feel this about theatre as well. They'll be like, oh, there's a new play. It's at the Sherman, it's at Pontio in Bangor or somewhere, and everybody goes to see it, and they love it or they hate it. but it gets a lot of attention because it lives inside that vacuum. And for those reasons, you can't really afford to fail, because people will go and say, oh, that was a bit rubbish, wasn't it? I didn't like that. And people then get frightened about that failure. And what you need to do when you make work as a creator is you need to fail sometimes, because that's how you learn. So I think what we need to encourage people to do is to be bold with their ideas and not be frightened of failing. And for anybody who is starting out as a filmmaker, go and make your horror movies with your friends. Go and make that work, go and show it, because we need to push those boundaries. Our horror film, it's like everyone was like, Welsh language horror film? Really? No one's going to want to see that. And that makes us excited, because we go, yeah, we are going to make it, and it's going to be great. But if it hadn't been great, we would have fallen into that trap exactly of people saying, told you so.
And I think, that's true for the actors then, and how that makes them feel, because I don't want to speak for you, but on the committee again, a lot of the actors are having to go out of Wales to get work because the films and the content weren't being created here. But I'm sure then, it makes you feel better to feel that there's more happening here, there's more films that you can be part of. And
the opportunities of working with is a fabulous one. And if you have that, the budget, the resources, the scripts, the actors, and it's all here. And it's been here for a very, very long time. And at last, I think we're getting a level of publicity and success beyond the bogus of just hearing wins.
Well, fantastic. Before we wrap, and I pass to Matt, I'm sure everyone here would like to wish everyone who took part in the film, created the film, congratulations. Fantastic night at the Cymru. I suppose we should also say Penblwydd Hapus to Espadrec. Happy birthday to S4C as well. Properly middle-aged, age 40 now. Let's hope.
You have to sing now.
Yeah, no. I don't think anyone wants to hear that, Beth, in the nicest possible way. And of course, let's hope that S4C or whatever succeeds, it continues to have a bright future, and there are debates to have, and the future of broadcasting in whatever way that takes in Wales. Let's include podcasts for the sake of it, shall we, Matthew?
Gonna have to do it.
Let's hope that whatever happens in the future of Wales, that the voice of the people of Wales from whatever community you represent is heard.
Yes, thank you, Richard. I just want to say thank you very much to our wonderful panel, Dewi Rhys Williams, Bethan Syed and Roger Williams. If I could have a round of applause. Also, thank you very much to Chapter for hosting us this evening. If you have enjoyed what you've heard this evening, please don't forget to find Hiraeth on the socials at HiraethPod. Go to our website, www.walespolitics.com, and thank you very much for supporting us today with your eyes and your presence. But if you would like to do so also with your wallet, you can go to www.patreon.com/HiraethPod. Diolch yn fawr iawn i chi. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening to Hiraeth. If you like what you heard, please don't forget to subscribe, rate and review.